Welcome to PM Ready, your guide to becoming PMP certified. This is the lesson on planning change management and configuration management. In this lesson, we'll be covering change management, configuration management, and organizational change management. We'll compare and contrast these and show how they interrelate. Planning change management and planning configuration management both, of course, belong to the planning process group. They're also both part of the integration management knowledge area. These management plans are put together as part of the project management plan as a whole, and this planning is done during the Develop Project Management Plan process. As you look at this integration management knowledge area, notice that it has processes in each of the process groups, starting with initiating all the way through closing. As you look at the different processes in these different columns, look at the top row and notice that Develop Project Charter, Develop Project Management Plan, Direct and Manage Project Work, Monitor and Control Project Work, and Close Project or Phase, that all of these processes are the core integrative processes that you have on a project. These are the processes that absolutely must be here as part of the integration management knowledge area. In addition, notice that you have Manage Project Knowledge and Perform Integrated Change Control. These two processes are here because they're also somewhat integration related, but I would consider them somewhat secondary because these could, in theory, be separate. You could have a separate knowledge area for managing project knowledge. You could even have a separate knowledge area for change control. The PMBOK guide doesn't choose to separate those, but they are a little different from the core integration management of developing the project charter and managing the project and closing it. So these do belong in integration management, but seeing them as primary and secondary types of processes may help you to remember them. Also notice that we have the Perform Integrated Change Control process that is related and is part of monitoring and controlling. We'll have a separate lesson on that later. Now it's time to introduce, at a high level, how these different types of management interrelate and how they fit together. At a high level, change management is how you manage change requests on your project. Configuration management is a little bit different. It's how you manage changes to things without breaking them. And organizational change management is often referred to as simply change management, which makes it very confusing to distinguish between the two. But this kind of change management is when you're making changes to an organization, and it especially involves how you get people to accept these sorts of changes. However, all three of these are about change management. So let's start taking a little bit closer look at the differences between these two. The change management plan describes how the change requests in your project will flow throughout the project and how they'll be formally authorized and, if approved, incorporated into your project. It's primarily about the change requests. The configuration management plan, on the other hand, describes how the information about the items of the project, and it also describes which items, will be recorded and updated so that the product, service, or result of the project remains consistent or operative. As you can see, change management and configuration management are complementary. You will use change management to control your change requests and get them properly approved, and you'll use configuration management to manage those changes and make sure that what you're developing doesn't get broken. And it also applies to operations in making sure that different components of an operational environment stay in good working order. Project change management is concerned primarily with change requests. Stakeholders can request just about any sort of change, and your change management procedures can specify which stakeholders can request changes. But generally speaking, just about any stakeholder can request a change on your project. What is quite common is for stakeholders to request new features or to request that a feature be changed somewhat. As these new features are proposed, this information needs to be properly captured. You gather the details of what this change is, do a little bit of digging and analysis to make sure you fully understand what this request is and that the stakeholder fully understands what they're asking for. You may also have a situation in which you need to use different resources for your project, or you can't get the team member you had hoped to get and you need someone else, or there's a necessary change in your team membership. Perhaps someone gets pulled off onto or needs to be pulled off onto another project. These kinds of requests from your stakeholders are also change requests that need to go through your change management process. There could also be a requested change to your delivery date. It's unlikely that you'll be given more time just as an independent request, but it is quite common for your stakeholders to ask for delivery to come a little earlier. These sorts of requests also need to go through your formal change request process. The same thing holds true for your budget. You probably won't be given more money unless there was some new feature or other change that prompted it. But oftentimes there are budget cuts that can drive a change. Contracts can also be changed. Hopefully not too often, but sometimes as a subcontractor or vendor is working on something for you, they may come across something and want to do something a little bit differently. They may have a proposal to do something better or faster or less expensively or something, but they need a change to the contract to allow it. You may even come across a new quality requirement, or new quality requirements could be introduced by your stakeholders because of a legal requirement or new findings from market research, and so on. All of these types of requests need to be properly documented and reviewed, and either approved or rejected by whoever is authorized to make these reviews, approvals, and rejections. Oftentimes, this is what is known as a change control board, a group of people that have been specifically authorized and tasked with reviewing proposed changes and deciding whether to approve or reject them. Changes can also be grouped into two categories, either preventive or corrective types of changes. A preventive change is some activity that is intentional that you take that ensures that future performance of the project work is better aligned with the project management plan. Something you do in advance to avoid a problem or to make sure things are going well. This is a situation when nothing's gone wrong yet, but you want to make sure that nothing goes wrong. A corrective change, on the other hand, is an activity in which something has gone wrong. Perhaps you've gone through your control quality process and you've identified that there's something going on that is creating problems and your deliverables aren't passing your quality requirements, and you have a suggestion for a change that would correct whatever needs to be changed in order for future project work to be aligned and valid. Your change management plan is developed during project planning as part of the project management plan and as part of the integration knowledge area. And it describes how all of your project change requests are going to be handled throughout your project, how they will be submitted, reviewed, and formally authorized or rejected, and if approved, how they will be incorporated into your project. The review, analysis, and either approval or rejection of change requests is handled during the Perform Integrated Change Control process, which is part of the Monitoring and Controlling Process Group. The change management plan also provides the direction for managing the change control process as a whole and documents all of the roles and responsibilities for the Change Control Board. The Change Control Board is that group of people that you select that will review all of the proposed changes. Your plan should also specify your change control meetings, how they happen, how often they happen, and the main point of these meetings is to assess the impact of every change. Is this change going to increase costs, increase the budget, increase risk, require more resources, require a change to contracts, and so on? Because change management and configuration management are so closely related and so complementary, your change control board may also be involved in configuration management activities. It may be the same board taking care of both, or the two may be closely related and overseeing and watching each other's activities. The change management plan should document everything about change requests: who's allowed to submit them and how, what sort of form they should use, and how this form should be submitted to the change control board. Is there a system involved for submitting these requests? And everything about the process. How are they reviewed? Who reviews them? Is it a change control board or someone else? Is it just the project sponsor? When and how often are these meetings to review changes? Although you'll see reference to the change control board quite often, your change management process doesn't have to have a change control board. It is optional. There are other ways that you can specify that someone needs to review these changes. But your document should specify all that, including when changes are reviewed, how often. Also, it should specify the different types of change requests and whether or not there are different processes for different types. For example, you may identify or categorize your change requests as either high or low priority or high or low urgency, and have different processes for these different types of changes. In fact, some may need review by a change control board, and others may be considered more minor and don't need the full change control board for their review and approval. It should also specify how to implement changes. Who's going to be responsible? How will these changes be handled as far as oversight and reporting and recording of what happened and review of what was done? How will changes be checked and verified and reviewed later to see if the expected benefits of the change have been realized? And now we take a closer look at configuration management. It may help you to understand the differences between change and configuration management by looking first at how configuration management applies to operations. Configuration management is all about recording all of the details of, say, your computer network and all of its switches and servers and so forth that make your network operate and function properly. Configuration records not only how everything is all set up and configured and what is needed in order to get it working and maintained properly, but also records all of the changes that you've made and specifies rules for making any future changes. If there's a new security patch that is applied to some of the switches in your network, what that patch is and how it was applied and when and by whom and what all of its settings were when you made this change need to be captured in your configuration management system. This has several benefits. It means, first of all, that if one of those switches goes down and needs to be reconfigured or replaced, you have a detailed record of exactly how it needs to be set up and configured to function properly. It also provides you the benefit that if this software upgrade caused some undesirable side effects and there's a need for you to at least temporarily rewind and go back to what you had before, you have a complete record of what you had before you made these changes. This kind of versioning is critical to a complete configuration management system. In this way, you can roll back or rewind to what you had, say, a week ago and go back to having a functioning system until you can resolve what that issue was. Or if you have a certain component in your network that goes down or fails and needs to be replaced, you have all of the details you need to order a new one and get it installed and working properly. Now, naturally, as your project has its deliverables completed and you're ready to now move or transition them into the operations environment, you'll need to interface with your operations configuration management in making sure that your deliverables are moved into the operational environment and function properly, and that all of the information needed to maintain them is also included. However, configuration management on projects doesn't stop there. You can and should also use configuration management during the execution of your project, not only to manage the deliverables that you're generating, but other large components and other artifacts of what you're building, as well as your project management artifacts. Things like your status reports and your control quality reports. All of these kinds of things that your project management process generates should also be placed under configuration management, or at least those important parts that you feel are important to be part of configuration management. In the case of software development projects, your code repository with version tracking, in which you store all of the versions of your code, is an example of a configuration management system, or a portion of it. Your configuration management system should also include all of the rules that your team has for making any changes to the code and checking it in, such as whether you're using code branches or feature toggles. The benefits of configuration management for projects include knowing that you've got the correct version of any of the configuration items and that that correct version is being used by the project team, knowing that any changes to configuration items, such as your code, are made only by those who are authorized, that all of the correct stakeholders receive proper notification of any changes, and that you have a complete record of changes and a version history so that you can go back to previous versions of these different components. What needs to have configuration management applied? Everything from physical items to documents, forms even, and all sorts of records. Any items that must meet legal requirements, items that must meet health and safety guidelines, items that are sent out to subcontractors, vendors, or partners, items that have an impact on processes or deliverables outside of the current project, items that form a large component of your project's deliverable or deliverables. For operations, all sorts of things such as IT systems, military systems, aircraft, bridges, buildings, and even engineering diagrams and specifications can benefit from configuration management. In the IT field, there is a standard called the Information Technology Information Library, or ITIL, which specifies rather detailed configuration management practices. When it comes to your projects, things that should be under configuration management include your project deliverables, code if you're writing software, the tools that you're using. If you're writing software, what are the different tools that you use to create and manage that code? Those should also be under configuration management so that you make sure that everyone is using the right tools and that they're properly configured, and that as you change tools, you have a history of where you've been and can make a smooth transition. For similar reasons, any manuals that you use in the development of your project. Also, your project management plan, your scope baseline, your schedule baseline, your cost baseline, all of these things that can and should be baselined should be under configuration management so that you have full history of their versions. Also things like your status reports, even your project communications, documents such as your issue log, your risk register, and your stakeholder register. Sometimes it's very valuable to see how these things have changed and to be able to go back to a previous version. But particularly important is that you make sure that everyone has easy access to the correct and latest version of each of these. And that falls under configuration management. Your configuration management plan should specifically identify all of those items that you've decided need to be controlled. These are referred to as configuration items or CIs. It should also define the roles and responsibilities and authorities of those involved in configuration management. It should define all of your configuration control processes and procedures, as well as status accounting and metrics definitions, so that you can see the status of each configuration item and each of its previous versions, metrics to track what has changed, when it was changed, who changed it, what impact it's had, and you can use this information in the future to estimate time, cost, and risk of similar work or changes to be done in the future. Also a list of the audits and their procedures and their relationship to your project schedule, meaning what audits will be done, by whom, and when are you going to fit this into your schedule. Very often you will hear people refer to change management, but what they're really talking about is organizational change management. Examples include things like some corporate restructuring, or changing a business process, or even deploying a large software system such as a new ERP. It could be to introduce a new project management methodology, or to create a PMO in your organization. All of these kinds of changes that are changes to your organization are organizational change management. When you hear the term change management, make sure that you know whether you're talking about organizational change management or project or operations change management. A few key things to remember from this lesson include that your change management plan is specifically for your projects, and it specifies how you're going to manage your change requests. The process of reviewing your change requests is part of the Perform Integrated Change Control process. It is the main purpose of the Perform Integrated Change Control process, and it may specify the need for a change control board. On the other hand, your configuration management plan can affect both operations and projects. Your configuration management plan is more focused on how to manage changes and keep everything working properly. In an operations environment, it's about keeping your systems up and running properly. And in projects, it can be used for the same purpose to make sure your project is running smoothly. In configuration management, you identify those items that you need to manage, and they're called configuration items. Different from all of these is organizational change management, which applies specifically to changes to your organization. For more information, you can refer to these pages of the PMBOK guide, as well as the practice standard for project configuration management, published by PMI. You may also wish to consult with other online resources, starting with Wikipedia. PM Ready is a publication of PM Guaranteed and is based on the Project Management Institute's PMBOK guide.